All right, you beautiful humans, we are just going to dive right in here on a few accessory options for those of you who have been asking me about some recommendations, because you may be on the move again, and I've got a few options for those that are and are not in the creative space, but I do think that you'll find some overlap here. And I also have a new piece of gear that I'm really enjoying right now, and I do have some test results for you. But if you've been looking for a solution to help protect your M1 Mac, so the M1 Pro or M1 Max machine, I'm sure many of you are in the same situation when it comes to looking for a protective case. And really, those are hard to find. They seem to either be back-ordered or just not readily available. But when you're about to pack up and hit the road, I've got this laptop case from TomTalk here, and it does fit the latest 14-inch MacBook Pro quite well. It's got military grade corner armor protection, super comfy padding on the inside here, and then of course water resistant material on the outer shell. YKK zippers, of course, love that. And then if you need like a little storage pocket here, you got that as well. And there is a review on there that kind of like, I love TomTalk. I use their cases for my iPads. But one of the reviews I saw on this was apparently someone who had a high-speed drop that occurred while on a motorcycle, and based on their experience, which I know your mileage may vary, no pun intended, but the fact that their laptop was able to sustain a hit and still work with some very minor cosmetic damage, it is pretty impressive. And of course, the photos are over there. I'll link it up, but the photos are over there if you want to see them. And so whether I'm here or on the move, I always bring an external SSD and trying to keep the mess off of the internal as much as possible. And I still recommend the SanDisk Extreme lineup. I'm still enamored by this, but this DIY solution from Sabrent that allows me to choose the SSD that I put in there, which my go-to is typically the SN750 from Western Digital. I do have the Samsung 970 EVO Plus in here, and I've tested this enclosure, and I've even compared it to a couple of other enclosures, this is much less expensive than some of those Thunderbolt 3 enclosures. But again, I'm really loving the smaller footprint while not sacrificing any real world performance. And since we've gotten back some of that precious IO on these machines, the need for hubs and adapters may not be as pressing, especially since the SD card slot came back. But for those of you who still may need a USB Type A adapter, I do have a couple of these Type C to Type A adapters, and I was pretty stoked about this because I was cleaning out my office and I found my 30-pin connector for my iPods. Because at this point, why don't we just kind of forget about inconveniently streaming a nearly unlimited amount of audio and get back to loading up songs on our iPods? So with these adapters, I can definitely do that. And for those of you that have been able to say good riddance to these USB Type-C hubs, I've definitely appreciated, as I said before, having the SD card slot back. However, again, there may still be some of those times where you need that additional Type-A support, especially if you're in a workflow where you need to plug in multiple peripherals or even additional drives. But the fact that we can still charge via MagSafe and still have 3 Thunderbolt ports and that HDMI port may still be plenty, and you might not need the hub and you can forego that, but I just wanted to recommend that as an option. And speaking of that additional connectivity, you may find yourself in a situation where you're going to need a few cables, and a great place to put these cables would be something like a travel organizer. And depending on how slim you want to go here, I have used these options for the last several years. And if you need to go lightweight, then this trifold option from Be Unique, Be Myself is great to have that smaller footprint, keeping everything organized with your adapters and your cables and zipper pockets here. But if you need to level up that game, if you need something like the double layer travel option where you can open this up, still keep all of your cables organized. We'll talk about these cables in a sec. But then going into where you can keep your plugs and larger items in the bottom. And of course, apparently, I have a fortune. Everyone has a photographic memory. Some just do not have film. Of course, that's pretty typical for a fortune, I think. And of course, asking myself how many times I've been on a shoot and someone needs a USB Type A to Type C, and I have definitely got you covered on that. Or you need a Type A to Type A male USB. I got that one right here, and you're good to go. But how about a Type A to a micro USB? Well, I do have that, but after we're done with whatever we're doing, you are definitely headed to the store to upgrade your tech. But cables do matter, and I will say that they're all not created equal. I do spend a little bit more in this department because, as an example, with this Gen 3.2 USB Type-C cable, this will allow up to 20 gigabits per second and up to 100 watts of fast charging, but will definitely work well with an external display, which it is connected to my ultra-wide right now. And I do keep a Type-C to DisplayPort cable that'll support up to 4K at 60 Hertz, as well as an HDMI 2.0 cable that will support speeds up to 18 gigabits per second, which again will support 4K at 60 Hertz. And as much as we rely on our Wi-Fi sometimes, you might be getting some pretty spotty service. So if you're ever finding yourself needing a wired connection, then this gigabit Ethernet solution from Belkin should get you closer to the speeds that you may need, although it's not gonna fix bad internet overall, but this solution can really help. And something you can also use this with is the iPad Air Gen 4, as well as the iPad Pros. And I know some of you may be experiencing on the newer MacBook Pros with some slower Wi-Fi speeds, especially if those routers haven't been upgraded recently. And so you may find yourself needing to wire in, and I have tested this. It is wonderful. It's probably not something that you think about, but it is great to have in the bag. And I know all the rage for the Gen 3 AirPods is out there, of course, minus the fact that the kids are going back to wearing wired earbuds apparently. But if you don't want to get caught up, I'd still even recommend the Gen 2 AirPods, for the reason being that they are still readily available. You can pretty much often get them most places online or in stores, often discounted as well. And I know that for a bit more, you can upgrade to the Gen 3s or the Pros, but sometimes the Classic may be worth the cost savings. And I do use these every day. Was just on a Zoom call, use these through that call. I use them often, and I really can't say enough good things about them. Now, for those of us that may be on the move and either not near a power outlet or in those situations where you may be set up in a spot of the office or a studio doing something where wall power really isn't that accessible, the Omni 20 Plus from Omnicharge is a 70 watt hour power bank with a few more bells and whistles than the typical mobile power solutions that I have used in the past. And I do love the power banks. I have one here that I have used quite often to actually power my camera. I use it all the time, so that way I don't have to change out batteries. So this one from Anker is great, and I've taken it on my travels and even just kind of here in my studio. But the 20 Plus has 5 ways to charge with two, let's find those, two 3.0 18 watt USB Type A ports, a 60 watt Type C port, as well as the 100 watt wall outlet, or just a regular plug, as you can recognize that here, and a 150 watt DC port. And one thing that I really appreciate, which is a nice little add, is that it does have a 10 watt wireless charging capability right on top. Now, I did do some testing. So with the MacBook Pro, I plugged it in at 25%, so 25% battery on the MacBook Pro with that plug, and I got it to 80% before the Omnicharge just was done. But it did have to pause so that it could cool down once it hit around 60 degrees Celsius. And you can also notice a buzzing sound or whining around that plug because it was clearly trying to charge rapidly. But I also plugged it in via USB Type-C at 2% and charged it all the way up to 69% in just under about 2 hours. So it was about 1 hour and 57 minutes, which seems to be more efficient due to the heat loss that occurs from that rapid charge through the plug. And it didn't have any thermal issues during that charge. It didn't have to pause or anything like that. It just kept charging. Now, I did try it on the iPad Pro with 9% battery, initially drawing 35 watts and then settling to 30 watts, and then of course down to 15 and 10. As the battery gets charged, that's what happens. But I ended up with about 25% left on the Omnicharge with it after it reached 100% on the iPad Pro in about 2 hours. And for someone that likes to keep an eye on the battery status, the power draw, and the temperature of the battery, along with being able to configure a menu and some of those settings, it is nice to have the OLED screen to navigate through those options. And of course, right now, this is one of my favorite pieces of tech, and I'll be including it in my rotation when I'm on location because I can even get this for using for many pieces of my gear I may end up bringing along with me on location and or out in the middle of nowhere. And I will be doing a reveal of some of my gear that I do use daily on my desk here in my office, as well as a few other pieces in the office. But I really would like to ask you, because I'm always curious, what are some helpful or cool accessories that you have found for your latest devices? I really would love to know. I'm always curious to find new pieces of tech that I can review or talk about here on the channel. Of course, you can find me right here, as always, in the comment section or over there on Twitter. You go rock those beautiful faces, and I'll catch you right back here on the next one.